Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Chof Aleph, Amud Aleph. Start with Daf Chof Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. When the Kohen Gadol is chayiv from his own funds to bring a minchas chavitin, that's a series ha'efa, 1/2 in the morning and 1/2 in the afternoon. Our Mishnah discusses a case where the Kohen Gadol dies. In the interim, no Kohen Gadol was appointed in his place. So therefore, who's responsible for the funds that will then buy the minchas chavitin? It's a machloikis. Our Mishnah says that according to the Tana Kama, this is brought by the tzibur's funds. That means that the Trumas Halishka has to provide for the funds of this minchas chavitin. Rabbi Yehuda argues and he says it comes from the Yarshin of the Kohen Gadol who passed away. Those monies that are in their possession, that has to then be providing the minchas chavitin. The Gemara now asks the following question. Rabbi Ba Bar Mamul Boy Mechlafa Shita Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Shita L'chara is michlaf, is indeed turned around. It's switched. Tamon, referring to our Mishnah, Omar Mishel Yarshin. V'hocha Omar Mishel Tzibur. Now to understand this question, we have to make a diuk in the Mishnah. Because we said just before, we did correctly say, that the Tanakam, which is Rabbi Shimon, says that the funds that provide the minchas chavitin after the Kohen Gadol dies comes from the Trumas Halishka, from the Tzibur. However, Medayik from the Mishnah states that V'tnai bezdin hu al Kohen Gadol shemeis shetei minchaso kreva mishel Tzibur. Rabbi Yehuda Oimer Mishel Yarshin. From the Mishnah, the fact that it introduces the din by saying it's a Tnai Bezdin hu, and Tanakama says that the funds are provided from the Tzibur, that is mashma, that is only because it's Tnai Bezdin, but min ha-Torah, it would be provided from the Yarshin. So the Gemara is asking from our Mishnah, which it calls it Taman, because here, apparently Rabbi Bo Bar Memel was learning he's already learning the Masechet Menachos. So he says over there in Shekalim, the Mishnah states that it's Mishel Yarshim Midia Raisa. Rabbi Shimon says that the minchas chavitin has to be provided from the funds of the Yarshin. Vehocha, but over here in the Braisa in Menachos, which we had quoted earlier, Omar Mishel Tzibur, it belongs from the Tzibur. So here we have a switching of the Shita. Which one is it true? Minat Torah, is it coming from the Yarshim? Is it coming from the Tzibur? Omar Bichia Bar Bo V'lo Yaus Humaksha. Is he not asking a good question? On top of Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph. Also Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha Rabbi Abo B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan Devar Torahu. Shetehei Bo Min HaTzibur. Min HaTorah, it comes from the Tzibur. Only what? We'll read now the parentheses. Kivan dechazi deka midcha lishka hayisi oimer yigvu la mina yarshin. Kivan dechazi depash eba hiskinush deba mitrumas halishka. I'll explain like this. Initially, really, min haTorah, it comes from the Tzibur. And that's really what Rabbi Shimon was saying in the Braisa. But since it was becoming onerous on the Tzibur to provide the funds for the minchas chavitin, during the second Beis HaMikdash, there were many kohanim that wanted to be Kohen Gadol, and they were not roy to be the Kohen Gadol, and therefore there was a lot of time in between where they had to find a Kohen Gadol. Therefore, it became very cumbersome on the Tzibur to provide the minchas chavitin. So therefore, indeed, they made it so that it comes from the Yarshin. However, once the Yarshim themselves they became weakened and did not want to then provide the money necessary for the minchas chavitin, so therefore, ultimately it was then niskan, and that's what the Mishnah over here in our Mishnah says, it says Tnai Bezdin who al kohen gadol shemeis minchas kreiv mishel tzibur. Then they made a Tnai Bezdin. They ultimately made a new takana that the fun should come from the tzibur once again. So that's the lashon of the Gemara. If you read with the parentheses, I'll read it again inside. Kivan de chazi. I'll go from the beginning. And the second, and from the first line. Also, Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, Rabbi Abo b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, Dvar Tarahu. Really, it's Dvar Tara that it comes from the tzibur. Shedei bo minat tzibur. And now we're reading the parentheses. Kivan de chazi de ka midchaka lishka. Once they saw that it was dochak in the lishka, it was hard for the tzibur to provide the funds of the minchas chavitin. But I said that it should come from the yarshin. Kivan de chazi de pashu. But once they saw that the yarshim were weak and they were not giving the proper funds for the minchas chavitin, they therefore made a takana that should come once again from the chumas halishka, from the tzibur's funds. Rabbi Yossi Amar Rabbi Yochanan boy, he asked the following: Mahu shleima b'shachris v'shleima mein harboim. That which we said now, that the kohen gadol who brings normally a half of the minchas chavitim of the asir sa'ef in the morning and half of the asir sa'ef in the afternoon, and we know that once he dies, before there's a new kohen gadol that's appointed, so the entire minchas chavitin has to be brought. So ask the Gemara the following question: Mau shleima b'shachris v'shleima ben harboim? Is it entire amount of the minchas chavitim of the asir sa'ef in the morning and the entire amount of the asir sa'ef in the afternoon? Or does it mean when it says that it's brought entirely, it means the entire asir sa'ef in the morning and none at all in the afternoon? The Gemara says, if you'll say that it's going to be answered, as it says in the pasuk, minchas tamid shloisha lugin. Are you going to tell me that's an answer we learn out from the korban tamid? And just as the korban tamid is brought entirely every day, morning and in evening, tamid shel ben shachar, tamid shel ben harboim, so too the minchas chavitim has to be brought also, as it's called tamid, as a form of in the book, and also ben harboim, also in the afternoon. Then the Gemara asks the following question. The Gemara says, then what do we say by the shlosh lugim in regards to the minchas chavitim? Shacharis v'shlosh lugin ben harboim. Do we say there's an entire 3 lugin of the oil that is we normally have 3 lugin with asir ha'efa, and we say half normally is brought in the morning, half is normally brought in the afternoon. But now that there's no kohen gadol, and we say the entire asir sa'efa is brought in the morning, and the entire asir sa'efa is brought in the afternoon. What about the 3 lugin of oil? Do we say the entire 3 lugin is brought in the morning, and the entire 3 lugin brought in the afternoon? Or lug umechza shacharis umlug umechza ben arbaim? Or do we say no, half of that amount is in the morning, and half the amount is brought in the afternoon? And that means 1.5 lugin in the morning, and 1.5 lugin of oil in the afternoon. Rabbi Chizkiya uf hada tzrichale. Even this we have to ask. Shnei kumtzin. What about 2 kumtzin when it comes to the levoina? Do we say that the levoina, which is normally brought as 1 koimetz, right? Do we say that now, since normally it's 1 koimetz in a normal situation, we bring asir za'efa with 1 koimetz, each is halved, so that's half a asir za'efa in the morning with half a koimetz in the morning and half in the afternoon. Now that we're saying it's a whole asir za'efa in the morning and a whole asir za'efa in the afternoon, so now do we have to double it? Mahen shnei kumtzin b'shachris shnei kumtzin ben harboim. Do we say that there's 2 kumtzin in the morning, kumtzin and the ben harboim? In other words, I said it wrong. That normally there's a whole, according to this, there's a whole koimetz in the morning and a whole koimetz in the afternoon. Now that we're doubling it, we're saying the entire asir za'efa is brought in the morning. Do we say the 2 koimetz is brought in the morning and 2 koimetz in the afternoon of the levoina? Or do we say no, only 1 koimetz, even though the asir za'efa is entirely, but only 1 koimetz is brought in the morning and 1 koimetz is brought in the afternoon? Rabbi Yoisa klum lomdu chlokaimes lo minchas chayte. Do we not anyways learn out the koimates from minchas chayte? There's different girsos that we learn daf yud ches amud beis, if it's learned from minchas chayte or from the lechem haponim al koponim. We learn out anyways that we learn two kumtzin. Ma lahalon shnei kumtzin, just as over there is two kumtzin, af kan shnei kumtzin. So too over here, regards to the minchas chavitin, will also be two kumtzin. The Gemara now answers the previous question. Do we not learn out three lugin from the tamid shel ben ha'arboim? And there it is also stated three lugin. Just as the tamid shel ben ha'arboim is three whole lugin, so too over here, if we're going to say that the entire Asiyus Ha'ef is brought in the afternoon, then also the entire three lugin will also be brought in the afternoon. Just as over there requires three lugin, so too over here it requires three lugin both in the morning and in the afternoon. The Gemara now refers to the Mishnah when its Mishnah states over here in regards to the al hapora shlo ye mo'alim be'efro. It says that they made a takana l'chara that regards to the para aduma. We know that the para aduma, the ashes are then mixed with water, and those ashes are sprinkled on those who are tamei mace. So it says that in this Mishnah, and in regards to the para, that there will not be a me'ila on the afer of the para. So the Gemara discusses this now. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon bar Nachman Shem Rabbi Yonasan, B'din haya sheyimaldu ba, v'hein gazu shlo yimaldu ba. He says it's mash from here, because it says in the Mishnah there's a takana that there's not going to be me'ila on the afer of the para. He says a diuk. It's mashma that b'dinhu really there should be a me'ila on the afer, but they were goyzer that there's not me'ila on the afer. Ask the Gemara, v'hotani chatos. Behold, it teaches it says chatos in regards to the living para. Aduma melame shimoy alim ba. There's me'ila on when one uses or misuses the para aduma while it's alive. Ba moy alim be'ein moy alim be'efer. Diuk is that only when it's alive is it considered me'ila, but once it's burnt, there's no me'ila on the afer. In other words, when it's alive, one is moyel in it, then he's chayiv a carbon me'ila. When it's now then burnt into ashes, there's no me'ila on the afer of the para. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Abo, you're right. There was a talich here as well. Barishoino hayu mishtakshin ba v'noisnoso agabi makosein v'goshi yimalubo. Initially, they were misusing the ashes of the paraduma. They were mezalzil in the ashes of the paraduma, and they were used it by putting it on their wounds, and therefore they were goyze the chachamim that there should be me'ila on the usage of the afer para. Now, it's not me'ila that you're chayiv a carbon me'ila for, but they would have to pay for using these ashes as a restriction. But once they saw that the people were being concerned that where there's a suffix of a tumas mace, they didn't want to use the ash of the paraduma because they didn't want to be chayiv for this me'ila. So therefore they then desisted. On that, the Chacham saw that that's a problem. So therefore they reenacted there's no me'ila on the afer para. The Gemara goes on, the latter part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah states when it comes to the kanim that are psulois, those pair birds that become psulois, it's machloikis. The Tanna Kama says that it goes the additional to make up for those psulois from the tzibur. Rabbi Yossi says it goes from the vendors who provide anyways the birds. Akopanim, the Gemara points out over here that this explains a problem that we had before. Now, in the previous Gemara, based on really it's a Mishnah on Daf Yud Tes Amid Aleph, the Mishnah says there's a coin between the pair birds, which according to this opinion is a chatos and an oila, and it's in between equidistant the kinin and the gozle oila, the oila offering birds. So the din is that we say it goes towards the kupa, the shofar of the oila offering birds. So the Gemara then has a problem because this woman, let's say she was a yoledes who brought the kinim, the pair of birds, one a chatas, one an oila. So ask the Gemara then over there, and as well as over here, how will she then gain a kapara? Hare, she brought the kinim birds, and now we're saying that this coin, maybe indeed it was something that belonged to the kinim that she provided to bring a kapara for herself. And now we're saying since it's equidistant, and we say Safek b'diaraisa l'chumra, so we'll go l'chumra and put it on the oilo birds. But at the end of the day, how does she get a kapara? She's mechuser kapara. So Gemara explains that based on this. Ha'isha hazois b'mehi miskaperes. This woman, again, let's say a yoledes, how will she get a kapara from these kinim, the bird that is a chata? She's lacking a kapara, since it's now being used for an oila. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchok, Tanai Bezdin hu. It was already implicit in the Tanai Bezdin as follows: Hamesapek es hakinin, hu mesapek es hapsulois ves haoivdois. They already put in a Tanai from the onset that if there's going to be birds that are either lost or become pasul, then the vendors, according to Rabbi Yossi, the vendors themselves will have to provide that shortfall, and they'll have to compensate for such birds, and therefore those birds will be brought as a safek korban chatos, which is permitted, and that will then work as a kapara for those ladies, for example, a yoledes who brought the kinim. Hadron aloch perek mois shenimtzeu.